Parents who adopted older kids. What made you say yes? We'd been approved for a baby girl? That was the plan. We'd spent almost 2 years on it, the home studies, the background checks, the stranger from the county sitting in our living room asking if we had a fire extinguisher and a plan for who'd watch the baby if we both got called into work at the same time. We painted a room pale yellow because we didn't want to guess wrong on pink or blue. We had a crib folded up in the garage, still in its box, because my husband said it was bad luck to build it before we had a name to put on it. Then the caseworker called and said, "There's someone I want you to meet first." And I remember standing in the kitchen holding the phone away from my ear like the words might make more sense from a distance. "A baby?" I asked. "No," she said. "Just come meet him. That's all I'm asking." We drove out that Saturday half annoyed, if I'm being honest. We had a plan. We'd built a whole life around a plan. My husband kept saying, "We're just meeting him. We're not agreeing to anything." Like he was trying to convince the steering wheel more than me. The group home smelled like a school cafeteria and industrial carpet cleaner. There was a corkboard in the hallway with kids' drawings pinned to it, the kind of cheerful decorating that always makes those places feel sadder, not happier. A woman at the front desk had us sign in, and she looked at our names on the clipboard and said, "Oh, you're here for Dylan," in a voice that had a whole history behind it that she wasn't going to tell us. We walked into a playroom with mismatched furniture and a TV bolted to the wall, and there he was, 13 years old, sitting alone in the corner with his knees pulled up to his chest, arms wrapped around them like he was trying to take up as little space in the world as physically possible. He had a backpack next to him that looked older than he was, straps frayed, a zipper pull replaced with a paperclip, 9 placements. That's what the file said. 9 families, 9 different bedrooms, 9 sets of house rules, and not one of them had lasted longer than a few months. I remember reading that number in the car on the way over and feeling something in my chest go tight. The kind of tight you feel when you already know a story is going to end badly and you're reading it anyway. We weren't there for him. I kept telling myself that. We had a yellow room. We had a plan. He didn't look up when we walked in. Didn't look up when the caseworker introduced us. He had a way of looking at the middle distance like he'd trained himself not to make eye contact with adults who were about to leave. Then a toddler wandered over from the other side of the room. She belonged to another family visiting another kid, maybe 2 years old, unsteady on her feet, holding a sippy cup like it was the only thing keeping her upright. She tripped over the edge of a rug and the cup went flying and she hit the ground and just wailed, the full body kind of crying only little kids can do, like the world had personally betrayed her. Every adult in that room turned toward her. Every adult except Dylan, who was already moving. He didn't say anything. He reached into that beat-up backpack and pulled out a stuffed rabbit, gray and matted and missing one ear, the kind of warn that only happens after years of being held too tight during nights that didn't go well. He crouched down in front of a total stranger's crying kid and just held it out to her. She stopped crying almost instantly, grabbed the rabbit, and clutched it to her chest like she'd owned it her whole life. Dylan stood back up, brushed off his knees, and walked back to his corner like nothing had happened. Sat back down, pulled his knees back up, went right back to staring at the middle distance. My husband grabbed my hand so hard it actually hurt. "That's his," the caseworker said quietly, close enough that only we could hear her. "That rabbit. It's the one thing he's kept through every single placement. 9 homes, 9 moves, and that rabbit is the only thing that's gone with him every time." I asked her, "Does he know that little girl?" "Never seen her before in his life," she said. We didn't talk about the baby girl on the drive home. Not once. My husband kept both hands on the wheel and his jaw kept doing this thing where it tightened and released, like he was chewing on something he didn't know how to say yet. Finally, somewhere around the highway exit for our neighborhood, he said, "I keep thinking about the rabbit." "Me too," I said. "He gave away the only thing he has," he said, "to a kid he's never going to see again, just because she was sad." I didn't say anything back. I just watched the exit signs go by and thought about the yellow room in our house that we'd painted for someone who didn't exist yet, and how maybe we'd been waiting for the wrong someone the entire time. We asked to meet Dylan again the following week. The caseworker sounded surprised on the phone, which told us more than she probably meant it to. "Most people don't ask twice," she said. The second visit was harder than the first, in a way I wasn't ready for. He remembered us. I could tell by the way his shoulders came up slightly when we walked in, a kind of bracing, but he didn't trust the return visit. Kids who've been given back learn fast that a second meeting doesn't mean anything. It's not a promise, it's just a second meeting. He didn't remember giving away the rabbit. When I brought it up gently, just to see, he shrugged and said, "I don't know, I guess I just do that." Like it was a tick, like it was nothing, like generosity was just something that happened to him instead of something he chose. That broke something open in me. A kid who gives away the last soft thing he owns and doesn't even think it's worth mentioning. A kid who's been taught over and over across 9 homes that what he needs doesn't matter as much as what other people need. I didn't want to fix that in him. I wanted to protect it and undo it at the same time, and I didn't know yet how you're supposed to do both. It took 8 months of Sunday visits before he called us anything besides sir and ma'am. 8 months of bringing snacks he wouldn't touch in front of us, but that always disappeared from the bag by the time we left. 8 months of him answering every question with with as few words as possible like he was rationing them. How was school? Fine. Do you like reading? It's okay. What's your favorite color? A long pause, like the question itself was a trap. Don't know. There was a Sunday in the 4th month when he didn't come out to meet us at all. The caseworker found us in the hallway and said he'd had a rough night, that another kid in the home had gotten a placement that fell through and came back at 2 a.m., and it had set something off in Dylan, some old alarm that wouldn't turn off. We sat in the parking lot for 45 minutes that day, not because anyone told us to, just because leaving felt like proving something was true that we didn't want to be true. We found out more about him in pieces, the way you find out about anyone who's been hurt. Not all at once, but in fragments that only make a full picture much later, after you've already decided to love the person the pieces belong to. His mother had struggled with addiction. Not a villain, the caseworker was careful to say. Just a woman who couldn't get free of something bigger than her, who loved her son in the moments she was present and disappeared in the moments she wasn't. There'd been a fire once, in an apartment when he was 6, and everyone got out. But Dylan had gone back in for the rabbit while a neighbor screamed at him not to. He still had a faint scar along his forearm from that day, pale and thin, and he never once explained it to us. We only learned what it was from the file. He'd bounced through relatives first, an aunt who couldn't afford a 4th kid, a grandmother whose health gave out before the system took over completely. Somewhere around placement 4 or 5, something shifted in him. He stopped unpacking his bags all the way, stopped putting posters on walls, started keeping everything he owned in that one backpack, ready to go, because packing slowly is what you do when you believe you're staying, and he'd learned the hard way not to believe that anymore. I think about that a lot. A kid who taught himself not to hope, because hope, for him, had only ever been the thing right before the leaving. Somewhere around month 6, he started leaving his door open when we visited. Small thing, massive thing. The caseworker told us that in the previous placement, his door had always been closed, and in the one before that, he'd slept with a chair wedged under the handle. An open door, for Dylan, was a sentence in a language he didn't trust himself to speak out loud yet, so he said it with hinges instead. The first time he laughed in front of us, it caught all 3 of us off guard. My husband had tripped over absolutely nothing, just his own feet in the middle of the playroom, and gone down hard enough to knock over a stack of board games. Dylan let out this short, surprised bark of a laugh before he could stop it, then immediately clapped a hand over his own mouth like he'd broken a rule. My husband, still on the floor, said, No, that's allowed. Laugh all you want. I'm a mess. And Dylan laughed again, quieter, like he was testing whether the first one had gotten him in trouble. It hadn't. Nothing had. That was the part he was still learning. We started the formal process not long after that. Home visits again, but different this time. Not 2 strangers judging a nursery, but a family being evaluated as a family, even before the paperwork agreed we were one. Dylan came for a weekend visit before anything was finalized, and I remember standing in the hallway outside the yellow room, the one we'd painted for a baby who was never going to exist, and asking him if he wanted to help us repaint it. He looked at the pale yellow for a long time. What color? He finally asked. Whatever you want, I said. He picked a dark blue, almost navy, the color of a sky right before it's fully night. We painted it together that weekend, all 3 of us, and he was careful and precise with the roller in a way that told me he didn't trust himself to make mistakes in front of us yet, even mistakes as small as a crooked line on a wall. My husband made a joke about how we'd need 3 more coats because Dylan kept quality controlling every stroke, and Dylan actually smiled at that, a real one, not the careful test laugh from before. He asked, halfway through the second coat, not looking at either of us, just at the wall, "Is this my room now? If you want it to be," I said. "What if I mess it up?" he said. Not really a question. More like he was handing us a test he expected us to fail. "Then we'll fix it," my husband said. "That's what rooms are for." He didn't say anything back, but he kept painting, and by the end of the day, that navy blue wall had exactly one small streak near the baseboard where his hand had shaken, just slightly, and he never let us paint over it. Years later, he told me he kept it on purpose, said it was the first mistake he ever made in a room he was allowed to keep. The adoption became final on a Tuesday in March, in a courtroom that smelled like coffee and old carpet, with a judge who'd clearly done this 1,000 times, but still took a moment to look Dylan in the eye and ask if this was what he wanted. Dylan, 14 by then, nodded, and then, like he'd surprised himself, said out loud, "Yes, I want this." It was the most words he'd said in front of a stranger in the entire time we'd known him. He brought the rabbit to court, held it in his lap the entire hearing, one hand resting on its matted gray fur like it was a hand he was holding instead. The years after that weren't a fairy tale, and I don't want to pretend they were, because I think stories that skip the hard parts do a disservice to every kid like Dylan who's still out there waiting for someone to say yes. There were nightmares that woke the whole house. There was a stretch in 9th grade where he stopped talking to us again for almost 3 weeks after a substitute teacher made an offhand comment about kids from broken homes, and it took him that long to trust that our house wasn't going to prove her right. There was a night he punched a hole in his closet door after a bad phone call with a caseworker about his biological mother, and instead of punishing him, my husband sat on the floor of that closet with him until 2 in the morning, not saying much of anything, just being a person who stayed. But there were other things too. Small, ordinary, extraordinary things. He started playing baseball in 10th grade and made us swear not to make a big deal out of it, and then hit a double in his first game and looked straight at us in the stands before he could stop himself, checking to see if we'd actually shown up. We had. We were the loudest people in that entire bleacher section, and he pretended to be embarrassed about it for approximately 11 seconds before he let himself smile. He started leaving us notes eventually, small ones on the kitchen counter, the way he'd learned to communicate in the months before he trusted his own voice. Home late, practice, ate the last of the cereal. Sorry. Once, just once, taped to the bathroom mirror where he knew I'd find it before work. Thanks for not giving up on the door thing. I didn't know what he meant by the door thing until I remembered, years later, that his door had always stayed open in our house, every single night, and he'd never once had to ask. He graduated high school on a warm evening in June, and during the ceremony, when they read his name, he found us in the crowd before he even walked across the stage, the same way he'd found us in the bleachers all those years before. Some habits, once they're built on something solid, just stay. He turned 18 this past spring. That's technically the age the system stops being responsible for you, the age a lot of kids like Dylan get quietly forgotten by everyone except the families who chose to keep choosing them. He didn't ask for anything special. He didn't want a party. He asked if we could go to the craft store instead, which confused both of us until we got there and he walked straight to the stuffed animal aisle without hesitating, like he'd already planned the route in his head 100 times. He picked out a rabbit, gray, soft, the closest match he could find to the one he'd carried through 9 homes and a courtroom and a lifetime of learning not to hope. He didn't say much while he paid for it, just stood at the register turning it over in his hands. I asked him what it was for. Gonna mail it to the shelter, he said. The one we met at. Kids come through there and don't have anything soft to hold on to some nights. Figured I'd fix that for one of them. No note, no name, nothing that would let anyone trace it back to him. Just a rabbit in a box, mailed to a building that had once held a boy nobody thought would ever say yes to a family, sent to some other kid who hadn't said yes to anything yet either. He still doesn't think it's a big deal, still shrugs when I bring it up, still says some version of, I don't know, I guess I just do that. Like, kindness is a reflex instead of a choice. Like he doesn't remember it's the exact same thing that made 2 strangers in a parking lot decide, without saying a single word to each other, that they weren't leaving that group home without him. People ask us sometimes why we said yes to a 13-year-old with 9 failed placements and a file full of warnings, when we could have kept waiting for the baby we'd already picked a yellow paint color for. I always give them the same answer. We didn't choose him because we felt sorry for him. We chose him because in a room full of adults rushing toward a crying stranger's child, he was the only one already there. Because he gave away the one soft thing he had left in the world to someone who would never even remember his face and called it nothing. You don't walk away from a kid like that. You paint the walls navy blue and you leave the door open every single night and you wait as long as it takes for him to believe you mean it. He believed it eventually. It just took longer than any of us expected, and it was worth every single day of the wait. I think about that first visit more than I probably should, replaying it the way you replay the moment right before something important happens, trying to figure out exactly where the turn was. Was it the rabbit? Was it his shoulders bracing when we walked back in the second time? Was it the way he said, I guess I just do that? Like kindness was a language he'd forgotten he was fluent in? I don't think there's one answer. I think it was all of it, stacked up slowly, the way trust has to be built with someone who's had every reason to stop expecting it. There's a version of this story where we walk out of that group home and keep waiting for our yellow room to fill the way we'd planned. I think about that version sometimes, not with regret, but with a kind of vertigo, standing at the edge of a decision already made and realizing how easily it could have gone another way. I don't let myself sit in it very long. It's not the one that happened, but you have to feel how close the other version was, if only so you never stop being grateful for the one you got instead. My husband says the thing he remembers most isn't the rabbit at all. It's the drive home after that first meeting, the 2 of us not talking about the baby girl, both of us quietly rearranging our entire future around a kid we'd known for 20 minutes. He says he knew somewhere around that highway exit, the same one I remember, that we weren't going back to the plan, that the plan had just changed itself without asking either of us, and and neither of us minded. Dylan doesn't love being talked about like this. He rolls his eyes when I tell this story at family dinners, tells me I'm being dramatic, tells his cousins I've told this one 100 times already. Maybe I have. I don't think that makes it less true, and I don't think I'll ever get tired of telling it because every time I do, I remember all over again how close we came to missing him entirely and how glad I am that we didn't. He still has the original rabbit, gray, matted, one ear missing, older now than he was when we met him. It sits on a shelf in his room, the navy blue one with the crooked streak of paint near the baseboard that he's never let us fix. He doesn't carry it anymore. He doesn't need to. He knows where home is now, and it isn't a backpack he can grab and run with in the middle of the night. It's a door that's always open, a room he's allowed to make mistakes in, and two people in a parking lot who decided, without saying a single word to each other, that they weren't leaving without him. That's what made us say yes. Not a checklist, not a plan. Just a boy who gave away the only soft thing he owned to a stranger's crying kid and didn't think it meant anything at all. It meant everything. It still does.